The member from Oshawa.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And I'm pleased to be able to stand and offer a few comments today on the fall economic statement, which is that economic update where we would hope to see the government where we do see the government priorities and what they've budgeted for. What we don't see are the priorities that folks across our ridings are calling for. We don't see the needs addressed that our neighbours in our communities are asking for those needs to be met. So it is a missed opportunity, I think, on a lot of fronts, but I'll break it down a little more specifically. This fall economic statement should be a call to action. We all look around and see a lot of reasons to worry these days, whether you're a senior, whether you're a parent of a young child, whether you are a student heading out into the world. There are a lot of concerns for folks right now, and it should be a call for action when it comes to healthcare, education, but there is no money in this fall economic statement, no new money for healthcare, no new money for education. There's nothing for mental health, autism. We're not meeting the needs of everyday Ontarians. I want to bring the voices of some actual folks. And some of these, these are letters that we're all receiving, Speaker. All of the MPPs in this House are receiving them, whether the government members read them or address these concerns. I don't know how they triage the needs coming into their office, but I'm happy to share this letter from someone, and I'm going to protect her identity because it's sensitive, but she wrote and said, quote, "I am currently living in an abused women's shelter. I fled my partner and I'm grateful to have survived. Along with the many other women I'm currently staying with, we have nowhere to go. Our only option is to stay in a shelter as landlords continue to discriminate against us due to our financial situation and personal circumstances. I'm extremely upset at the fact that no one is helping myself and the other women. We're all on some kind of waiting list to get subsidized housing, and yet we're told we can wait up to 2 years to find affordable housing. We fled our abusers for a reason, and we now face the challenges of getting our lives back together, and yet there are no resources available to help us find affordable housing. When we try to find even a place to rent, it's so high and it's not affordable. Why is the government not willing to help people like myself who actually need the help? Most women who have fled their abusers return, as staying in a shelter for more than 3 months is not allowed, and when you have no other option, do you really blame them? Our lives, along with our children's, should matter. Having a safe place to live should not be considered a luxury. It's a basic need, and yet we cannot obtain a place. Any resources you do find, there is no funding. I don't want to be homeless anymore. I want a safe place to live that I can pay for monthly and actually afford it." End quote. That's a real person who's really hurting. And I don't know how to help her beyond to make her feel heard, because the waiting list is real, because the services in our community are frozen in time. Will they get government funding? Will they get any more? They're working with what they've got, and it isn't enough. And the needs are through the roof in the community, if they're lucky enough to have a roof, and they're real folks. And there's nothing in this budget, in this fall economic statement for the shelters. There's not money in here for the kind of housing that she's asking for. This government can talk all day about housing, sorta, but they're not talking about affordable housing. They're not talking about protections for renters, right? This government has failed to increase supports for tenants in need of affordable rental housing and failed to increase funding for homelessness, and instead it's actually cutting funding. So I guess that's what I'll tell her. So other folks like her that are in dire need right now, we've been talking about ODSP, and there are some changes that we've been talking about that are positive for some, for like 20% of the people. But those on ODSP, it doesn't go far enough for people to survive, right? And the change that the government is making, and while we agree it's a positive change, it will only help roughly 20% of current ODSP recipients. And I was very proud to go outside with other members of the NDP. Was it last week or the week before when folks were here calling for this government to raise the rates? And we were glad to go out and talk with them. I watched what is he now? He was the president of the Treasury Board. What is he? The Minister of Finance. I watched him walk by that rally. We were there talking to them to bring their voices in here. I don't see enough for them in this. People in Ontario with disabilities who can't work are choosing to die because they can't live on the pittance that is provided. And ODSP rates kill because they don't provide Ontarians with disabilities enough income to live. So some changes, but not the doubling of the rates that we're calling for that is needed. And I raised a number of issues from people that we've heard from in our community, that folks who don't want to be forced to live beholden to skeezy landlords who take advantage of their desperation, like was outlined in the letter from the woman I read. They can't find safe places. They're in debt. They're in debt to utility companies. They are trying to clothe their children, and they can't. I want to read something else. So my staff works with folks on a regular basis who call in about one issue, but often people have complicated needs. And my staff was telling me about Heather, who is a retired education worker. She had to retire, quote, early because of a physical injury at work in the mid-2000s that prevented her from continuing her work. Her CPP disability benefits are so low because she retired at 39, and her wages at the time were low then. She has had to return to work driving a school bus. She still doesn't earn enough to live on. Her work is aggravating her disability and making it worse. She has a disabled son she's trying to support. She has to use food banks to make her money stretch. Why am I talking about Heather? Well, because she's one of our neighbours who doesn't see any of her needs being met in this fall economic statement. And I don't know how this government classifies folks like Heather and others who are, complicated folks with real needs. Try meeting them. We got a lot of seniors, and you'll probably start hearing this. We've got a lot of seniors, low-income seniors, who might have at one point qualified for the Ontario Seniors Dental Care Program. The lowest of the low-income seniors who at one point qualified for that, I think now because the feds have upped barely, they've increased some payments to them, a lot of them are going to suddenly be ineligible, like people we're working with, by like $18. So because the feds have incrementally increased some of their benefits, it has bumped them out of qualifying for your Ontario Seniors Dental Care Program, which already was too low. Like the threshold didn't allow enough people to qualify initially. And now I'm willing to bet that when that year is up for those folks, they will no longer qualify. So could the government not have made some allowance here to increase that so that people can keep their dental coverage, the lowest of the low-income seniors? Where's the care? You guys know about this one. This is not like I'm telling you something that the government doesn't know. By like $18, people are being disqualified. And the pain that goes with that, the discomfort, the agony, oh well, like, you know that one. I hate when the time goes from 20 minutes to 10 and we don't have enough time because I have a lot more letters to share. But I shared a lot of them last week, and I was glad to meet with I think it was like 750, almost 800 people who came to our office. The education workers came on that Friday, and I cleared what of my schedule I could so that I could walk and talk with them and hear their stories and hold their hands while some of them cried or said thank you. It was emotional. Those of you who chickened out and closed your offices and didn't meet with them, like, you missed out. These are real folks, and they're great people. And I have a lot more of their letters. People who've been, like Amanda, the educational assistant, who's been an educational assistant for 19 years. She has watched the job dramatically change over that period of time. And she is saying, it is heartbreaking when I have to tell my own children, I'm sorry Mommy's so tired and short-tempered today because the days with no supplies for absent employees are more common than not now and so draining physically and mentally. Or when my daughter says things like, why did you have a long day? Did one of the kids at work hurt you again? I mean, they've got unbelievable circumstances at work. We don't see even a new dollar into education. And then the government will say, but we're spending so much. Yeah, but inflation and the needs, you are not meeting the needs in the province of Ontario. Thank you.
Thank you. The member from Brantford-Brant.
Thank you, Speaker. I always appreciate speaking to the member from Oshawa because I know the passion that she has for her community and for emergency services and for emergency services providers. I've been intrigued over the past couple of days to hear the opposition. Their only criticism of the fall economic statement is that it doesn't go far enough. I hear that. I can see that, and especially as opposition, you have to say something. Often, though, the opposition will say that there's a poison pill in a piece of our legislation. We put good things in there, like, allowing ODSP recipients to be able to keep $1,000 more before there's clawbacks. I was wondering, there's no poison pill in this legislation that I've heard of over the past couple of days. Would you support the bill on principle, even though, as if you agree that it doesn't go far enough, but it does make a step in the right direction? Could we count on your support on the fall economic statement?
Member from Oshawa.
This is always their favorite question, but are you going to support it? I support the people in my community, and I wish that you would too. I support educators, education workers. I support the kids that are being turned away from hospitals right now because there isn't enough room for them, and that's a bigger, more complex thing. And we're talking about, yes, the fall economic statement, but why should I support something that really falls flat and doesn't acknowledge not only the need, but the hurt, right, and the harm? Like, what part am I supposed to get excited about and say thank you for when real people are struggling and suffering, real people that this government, like only a couple of weeks ago, were like applauding themselves for smashing into the ground and taking away their rights? Fine, they've backtracked, but couldn't even meet them in their own communities. Like, I don't know. I think the spirit of this speaks for itself. It's a missed opportunity, and I don't know.
So the member from Sudbury.
Thank you very much, Speaker. There we go. Thank you, Speaker. Thank you to the member from Oshawa who in a very short amount of time covered a lot, and I can see by her notes I had a lot more to cover. One of the things she said at the very beginning, Speaker, she talked about housing. And there's been this disconnect between the Conservative government and the Democrats in terms of housing in general. And there's this idea on the Conservative side that if you build enough, it'll trickle down. The way the trickle down has failed us for 40 years. Eventually it'll trickle down and there'll be some affordable housing. She shared a really great story about somebody who needed emergency shelter and then affordable housing as well. And I think it's important to talk about why it's important to invest in affordable housing. Not mythical affordable housing that might happen 10, 20 years from now, but today affordable housing that people desperately need.
Member from Oshawa.
I will never guess what they're thinking because I've learned after 8 years that I can't think like them. The concept of affordable has to mean something real, though, right? Like, it's not housing that you can afford or I can afford, but it's what people can afford where they are. And that, we talk about whether it's the missing middle or it's safe and affordable rentals. Like, there is a need for all sorts of kinds of housing. And housing just ain't going to pop out of the ground like daisies. And this government's, focus on developers will do the right thing versus taking leadership as a government and saying, let's ensure that happens, right? Like, there's so much more rain-taking that they could do to actually make sure communities have what they're asking for and our neighbours have a place to live.
The member from Niagara West.
Thank you so very much, Speaker, and my thanks to the member for Oshawa for speaking to the fall economic statement and the progress that the government is trying to make on many different issues and seeking to ensure that we're supporting the people of our communities. And I respect the fact that the member opposite raised some concerns about areas that she feels this legislation doesn't go far enough, and the member for Brantford-Brant asked if she was going to vote yes. And I respect that she didn't respond to that with a yes. She didn't really say whether or not she was going to vote in support or against. But the only other real option that she has is to vote against this legislation. So if she's not saying that she's going to vote for the legislation, I'm assuming she's going to vote against it. And my question is, how will voting against this legislation address the issues that you just brought up?
Member from Oshawa.
I actually quite appreciate the question. It was a little more clever than some that I've heard. I'm not going to tell you whether I'll vote for or against. I'm actually going to let you just, wait with bated breath. But I think that as many times in this House I've had to do, I've had to vote when I've had to vote against something or when I've chosen to vote against something. Often it's been on principle. Often it's been because I bring a sense of right and wrong, and I so often sit across from a government, and in fairness, the one before you, there was a lot that was wrong there too, and right and wrong, I felt I was, taking up the cause on behalf of real people that I know, that I listen to, and that I believe deserve to be represented in this House. And if I support harmful initiatives when this government puts them forward, I would be turning my back on people that I genuinely know and care about, and I'm never going to do that.
From Spadina, Fort York.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm really interested in the way you have that relationship with the school bus driver, and you were talking about, what are the government's priorities? And the government's priorities right now before the House, there's development charges. There's a Bill 23 which will reduce development charges for developers by millions of dollars. They just passed legislation to force seniors into for-profit long-term care homes. They've also allowing this crisis to foment in our healthcare system, and the only ones who are benefiting from it are the for-profit nursing agencies who are billing millions of dollars, $6.6 million just to the UHN. And so at the same time, this government has left minimum wage at $15.50 an hour when the minimum living wage in Ontario is over $23 an hour. Who do you think this government is serving? What do you say to that bus driver?
Member from Oshawa.
Man, you pack a lot in a question. What do I say to the bus driver? Okay, well, that was Heather that my staff was supporting, and when we talked to her, we dealt with the issue she actually called us about. Then she was talking about education workers because she had been one. We do our best to connect with folks and understand their issues and to try and connect them with services and supports that aren't there anymore or that we've watched, waiting lists be created, so technically they don't have to say they've ended funding, nobody gets it. You asked a lot of stuff. In fact, I don't really remember the main takeaway.
Response.
I'm going to keep saying to Heather and to other people that we are listening and we will continue to bring their voices to this space, try and fight for meaningful legislation that makes a real difference in their lives.
Question? Thank you. The member from Brantford.
Thank you, Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to ask one more question of the member from Oshawa, because again, what's been reiterated over the conversation this evening is the fact that there is nothing that has been put in this bill that is an absolute killer for the opposition not to be able to support this. And I understand that there's a lot more that they would like. But I was wondering, Speaker, if through you that she might be able to tell the people of Ontario whether she would want to help move the needle so that someone who's on the Ontario Disability Support Program can bring home $1,000 of income without having any clawbacks. I just think that's such a great step in the right direction. That's something that I've been fighting for the last 4 years. It's actually more than I was asking for from the minister, and I just think that's such a great move. And since there's no poison pill in this medication, could you just support the legislation?
So to his piece about the changes to allow people to earn more before the clawbacks, and we've said that and we're on record. That's important. It does only apply to 20% of the people. So the incremental nature of this is, I think, just speaks to the missed priority. And I love that you really, really need my approval of this piece of legislation. But I'm going to tell you that it takes me back to when I taught grade 7 and 8 and I was doling out report cards and people were desperate for that great mark. And you know what? I can't give it that. I can't give this
Response?
whatever, high grade you're wanting. I want more time.